G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom podcast.
He washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die." The Phantom! The ghost who walks. The Phantom. Enemies beware. The Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom.
Hello, we are the Chronicle Chamber team, and this is Expand the Phantom podcast. Our website is chroniclechamber.com, and you can contact us via our email, which is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to listen to us or watch our podcast on YouTube, iTunes, and the various Android apps. This is episode 204, where we are going to chat about the Phantom and crossovers. My name is Jermayn, and I am joined by Stephen and Dan. How are you two guys going?
Doing well there, Jim. Yourself?
That's good. Yeah. No, it's almost Christmas, so I'm sure we're all busy finishing up the school term, the year, and getting ready for Christmas. How about yourself, Dan?
Yeah, good. I'm at the end of a monster weekend in our family with my daughter's 18th birthday party on Saturday night and then my wife's birthday today. So that explains the bags under the eyes. And if you hear snoring tonight, it might be me, not Steve. But
don't be too sure. I've been battling a bit of a cold this past week.
No, I'm really excited about this one because it's the crossover episode is one that we've talked about for a while, and it's really good to be able to talk about the Phantom and the universes that he's wandered in and out of, and others who have come into his. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be interesting. Like the Phantom's would not have a list of crossovers or appearances as say in the Marvel DC universe, or even like the Dark Horse or mainstream, the comic media. So it's going to be interesting just how many crossovers and maybe even appearances there has been of the Phantom. And then, so what we're going to do is we're going to list some of the known ones we know, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion towards the end and through it as well. Now, majority of these crossovers that we do list are going to be licensed. Now, some will be unlicensed, but they are so iconic that they deserve a mention. And we will go over the majority of the ones that we know of. It's not an exhaustive list because, let's face it, we want to try and keep this podcast as short as possible. So if you know of one that we have missed, it's not an exclusive list or an exhaustive list, please let us know in the comments or email us as well. Now, some of these that we do talk about are just going to be appearances, i.e. the Phantom being the Phantom in a pan over in the Yellow Submarine video by the Beatles. But again, it's so iconic, it deserves a mention. There are similar appearances of the Phantom in heaps of Mandrake the Magician newspaper stories. That all took us by surprise how many times he has been referenced in there. But again, we will list some, but we will not discuss all of them. Links to all of the appearances of the Phantom in Mandrake Magician newspaper stories will be included in the show notes. So if you want to have a look at the exhausted list, please go there. But again, we will discuss some key ones and some ones that stand out to us. So what we're going to do is we've got a list of known crossovers in various categories, and then we're just going to take in turns going through it, and we have a bit of a discussion, and then towards the end we're going to talk about some of our favourites, and then talk about, do we deserve more and kind of going from there. So, Stephen, do you want to start us off in the first category and we can go from there?
Okay, so with our known crossovers, we've got video and audio. Jem's already mentioned about the Yellow Submarine music video. If you're not familiar with it, go check it out. It's fairly available on YouTube, I'd assume. But yeah, Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. They're back in the media at the moment with the Peter Jackson documentary that's come out. So that's a pretty popular one. Man Who Hated Laughter was a short movie from when was it, 60s, 70s, something like that.
Oh, something like that. Yeah, it's pretty horrible.
Don't go out and watch it. It's not that crash hot. But something that anyone of our generation, we're well, I'm now in my 40s, joined Dan. Germ's nearly there. But Saturday mornings, cartoons are what the 80s and 90s were built on, and the Defenders of the Earth TV show was an absolute staple of that time in history. And for a lot of people, would have been their first introduction to the Phantom. And what a crossover that was for us as kids watching it, and hopefully it's for more going back and watching it over as an adult. It's still been a great show.
Yeah, definitely. Like my oldest has watched the whole, all 66 episodes. She's watched it a couple of times, and so for the next generation, it still holds up. So yeah, it was an amazing TV show.
I was unfortunate that I lived in the wrong part of Australia during the 80s. I loved my time in the middle of the Northern Territory. Dad was a police officer up there, but what it did mean is that we only got ABC TV. That was literally the only channel we had right through the 80s, and it wasn't until we moved over to Queensland in 1989. So I never actually saw Defenders of the Earth on as a kid on TV, and it was only I saw maybe one episode here, one episode there over Christmas holidays when staying at grandparents in Victoria or whatever. And then I remember not particularly enjoying it, actually, and maybe that's because I didn't get the chance to watch it every week. But I was a Phantom reader by then, and so some of the elements, the twisting of the law, and some of the elements of the Phantom literally being able to call on the strength of 10 tigers through a magic act, the fact that he wasn't wearing the striped jocks, those things probably got in the way of me enjoying it, and I didn't have enough time and it's funny to think that even as an 8-year-old, I was sort of going, no, well, that's not my Phantom. So that's and maybe
even
that's
as an 8-year-old, you're an old folkist.
Yeah.
Maybe I was.
Were you bored back then as well?
No, I had a bit more hair. I was blonde actually originally. But anyway, I have obviously watched it since. I probably haven't even seen all 66 episodes, though, to be honest. So I've got some catching up to do there. But I certainly enjoyed it. I guess just as an adult, you don't have the chunks of time to sit down and watch the TV that you used to as a kid. So anyway,
we didn't have many channels where we were either. We had to went to grandparents or something. But we did have the merch, like the colouring in books and the little notepads and that sort of stuff. The activity packs that came out. I remember having them as a kid. And
and the Galoob toy remains one of my favourite. I've mentioned it before as one of my favourite Phantom collectibles. So I got that for Christmas in like 1985 or 86, and was my favourite toy forever.
I still don't have a Phantom one. I've got Mandrake and I've got Flash, but I don't have the Phantom.
So I was just thinking maybe we could do a special podcast series where we do kind of like a fan commentary of all 66 episodes. So maybe that might be a project where we later down the track when we've got nothing else to talk about. Just quickly talking about the colouring in books and activity books with the Defenders of the Earth. There was also a colouring in book for The Man Who Hated Laughter as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
do you have that?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you
if you're watching on YouTube, there will be a picture of it up on the screen as well.
Yeah, cool.
And that knitting pattern book, that's pretty much taken out of Defenders of the Earth with the tiger behind the Phantom, and of course Ming in there as well. So
for you raise a good point, and this is probably getting a little bit too distracted, which was probably always going to happen.
Well, is this a question we actually ask in the comments later, or?
But
that's what I've held off before as well.
It was so important because for a lot of people, it was the first time they ever saw Phantom merchandise. Was from the Defenders of the Earth TV show. Like Dan, you talked about the figurine.
Yeah.
Steve talked about the colouring in books. You got the jigsaw.
For about 30 years, that remained the best figurine. It's probably only just been passed by the NECA one, to be honest.
Yes.
So no, it was really good to. Well, I guess it gave us the expectation of our generation. It gave us the expectation that those things that could exist. I think older readers might have just been stunned that anyone had even produced one. All right, so newspaper stories. Steve's mentioned the video and the audio stuff. There has been countless newspaper stories. that the Phantom has at least appeared in. And as Jerm said, there's no way we've got all of those, but we do have a bunch of them that we have collected in the Phantom Preservation Projects. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can go and have a look at that. And Jerm, maybe even on YouTube, we put a screenshot of what they are in the, a screenshot of the files that are in the P3 there. But Judge Parker, Nancy, Carpe Diem, Inspector Danger, Hairbutt's an obvious one with Jason Paulus. We've talked to him about that in the podcast before. Swamp, the Australian comic strip as well. So they're all available there. So there's a bunch of that. The primary one, Jerm's already mentioned, that's Mandrake, of course. We've seen Mandrake cross over into the Phantom comic strip on quite a number of occasions. Most famously, perhaps, for his attendance at the Phantom's wedding, which we celebrated the anniversary of last week, I think. So that's probably the most famous one. But Mary Worth has also come across into the Phantom in the 243rd Daily, the Twins Futures. And there was, of course, the Defenders of the Earth promo sequence that was in the Sunday, in the 127th Sunday, Escaped Convicts. That same panel actually appeared in the Mandrake and the Flash Gordon newspaper strips on the same day. So there was a three-way crossover simultaneously, which I don't think has ever happened again, and must be reasonably unique in the history of newspaper stories, I would have thought, newspaper comic strips.
Yeah, probably definitely in the fact that they promoted like a TV show as well. So it was a unique page that appeared in each one. So it wasn't exactly like the same.
Yes.
But yeah, it was like the Phantom was dreaming, and Mandrake, I think he saw a vision or something like that as well. So, yeah. But you're right. It was it was kind of it was unique. It was a great way of promoting it. When the Phantom movie came out, Fred Fredericks did a retelling of the Phantom origin for that week of when the movie came out. So something similar in a sense that they were kind of doing a promotional of it. Yeah. It didn't happen with the 2040 series. Maybe if they ever do a new Phantom movie or something like that, they need to do something like that again. So it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah, and as much as anything, I meant the three different character arcs all having that same crossover on the same days. It would have to be pretty unique in the history of all newspaper comic strips, I would have thought.
Yeah.
If a newspaper carried all three of those strips, you'd be kind of like reading the same story three times, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. It must have been weird at the time, and I guess that it would have worked. We better go and watch this Defenders of the Earth show. So. Yeah. So outside of that, there's a bunch of cameos, as I said there, and also the Phantom has crossed over into Mandrake's world quite a number of times. Not just the Mandrake coming into the Phantom comic strip, but the Phantom going into the Mandrake comic strip. And as Jerm said, we were quite surprised when we saw the list on the Mandrake wiki as the amount of times that the Phantom's been over in his part of the world.
Yeah, a lot more than the Phantom. It was kind of like, oh wow, it just keeps scrolling through, and it's just like, oh.
Yeah. So again, make sure you check that out. We'll include the link to that in the show notes as well. But so in terms of newspaper stories, I guess it's happened a number of times, but a surprisingly few number of times across 85 years, even with the Phantom appearing in other King Features comics. It just hasn't really happened anywhere near as much as you might have thought. And what we see in that, I suppose, from the source material, which is what the newspaper strip is, a real reluctance to get involved in crossovers. And perhaps that is what has evolved over the rest of the time, because I know you're about to go through the comics, Jerm, but again, there's probably not as many of those as you would have thought.
No, I will say, though, there's been more in probably the last 10 years than there probably like proper crossovers, not appearances.
Yeah.
Then there's probably been more in the last 10 years than probably in the last 70 odd years. So I had Terry Beattie's done it twice in his Sunday stories, and then I think there was Paul Ryan's done it once as well. Get the feeling that Mike Manley's done it as well. a couple of times as well. So yeah, it's because I guess it's probably more gimmicky now with the Marvel movies and everything like that, where before they were, it just happened in comics. But I guess now everyone watches Marvel movies. They're like, oh, why can't the fandom have it? And so the creators are like, oh, let's have a bit of fun and stuff. So it's good to see. I wish we did see more in the newspaper, and it would be nice to see the Mandrake a little bit more as well.
Yeah. So, did you want to take us through the comics?
Yeah, there's a fair bit of these comics. So I might just take a couple, and then I might let you kind of go through it as well. Now, if there's anything you want to say as we discuss the comic as well, please do. So I guess probably the first proper crossover of the comics was the Defenders of the Earth comic book series. So there was the 4 comics. There was a 5th and a 6th story that were being created. You can find out more about that on our Phantom Preservation Project, and there's some links and stuff throughout the website as well about that. Now, that was kind of iconic in the sense that it kind of, you had the, what would you call it? You had the comic book series, although the TV series, and then you had the comic book series that kind of backed it up, and you had the same retelling of the stories and stuff like that. I believe the story 5 and maybe 6 were standalone stories as well, from what I understand, that didn't quite appear in the TV series as well. And then you've got, we'll go through the Frew ones, which were with with the giant size stories, in the more recent years. So one of my favourites has to be Scorpio by Shane Foley, which appeared, through probably a dozen giant size issues, where you had the Phantom, you had past Phantom bad guys, and you've got Frew characters like Catman, the Shadow, Sir Falcon, and all that. For me, what I liked about those is that they made those characters almost likable. I wasn't a fan of those characters until I read Scorpio by Shane Foley. Did you guys think the same, or?
I think the Scorpius was probably was a good way to go, actually this character's worth reading, and going back and reading some of their original stuff, because certainly the first giant size or 2 I would have read just cover to cover. Let's have a look at all of these other characters, and only a couple of them took for me. So, but then Scorpius I did enjoy seeing for Sir Falcon, for instance, in Scorpius. Probably not so much a fan of his stories. So it depends on how you use them. Whereas the Raven I enjoyed in both his originals and in Scorpius. So I guess they can't please everybody, but yeah, Scorpius was a good way to get introduced to those characters for sure.
It really gave them an opportunity to be fleshed out and be 3-dimensional a lot more than what was being put forward in the giant size. There were simplistic stories from 50, 60, however many years ago, and but yeah, bringing them forward and being written in a contemporary time, it was it really brought those characters to life. And like Dan said, from reading the giant size, I was already a fan of the Raven. I enjoyed reading the Raven stories. They really sprung out to me, and the Shadow, I've enjoyed his stories as well.
Yeah.
I still can't come at Catman though.
Yeah.
sorry, Catman, but you're still not doing it for me.
Because I wasn't a fan of the Shadow with the first story with the 1950 stories, but then in reading the Shadow in the Scorpio, it was kind of like he's probably got the most potential, I reckon, of being a comic book character that I may read more of his stories. Purely because of Scorpio. So, and then it backed it up with Death Dive, which was by Glenn Lumsden as well, which had amazing art, from Glenn. And we've talked to Glenn. There's a podcast where he talks a lot about that. So if you like Glenn Lumsden, if you like giant size and stuff, make sure you go check out that podcast as well. But Death Dive and Scorpio are probably maybe the reason why we're actually doing this podcast, dare I say. because
I
we
think I
enjoyed
was in
it
a
so
chat
much.
about this that we talked about. Oh, well, maybe there's a podcast idea in this chat that we're having.
Mm, mm. And then you've got the Raven. Now, Raven was not actually. So, Stephen, you really talked, and Dan, you've talked about how you both enjoyed the Raven. That wasn't actually in the giant size issue. It was actually a standalone 2-part series in the regular Frew series, and that probably took it to the next level. Just that, that the potential of what could happen. It had some amazing 1-page, panel from Ivan the artist, and I don't know about you guys, but I can't fault that story.
No, that story's great. The artwork's great. The story, even though I can't quite remember it, it's been a long week. But I remember enjoying that story up immensely, and yeah, there was so much potential there to what's the right word? Propagate another universe or another character and bring them up.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree. I enjoyed the Raven. I remember it. I certainly remember enjoying how well written it was, and a big part of that was the brevity of how the dialogue and stuff was used. But it was also, again, really good to see the potential for another character. And I guess we have to talk. We'll talk at the end of all of this as to whether you actually like the idea of crossovers, not in the first instance. But it certainly showed some possibilities, and it was a character that fit well in the Phantom's world. And I think that's another thing that we'll probably cover at the end, is what sort of crossovers would make sense, because certainly some wouldn't.
Yeah, true.
Oh yeah. So from Moonstone a number of years ago, I'm right there, aren't I, Jermaine?
Yes,
Yep,
you are right. Yep.
From Moonstone, there was a Phantom Captain Action crossover. I don't know who had naming rights, if it was Captain Action / Phantom or Phantom / Captain Action.
It was pretty even.
Pretty even billing. I do have this comic. There was a couple of different covers too. Like there was a swimsuit edition, if I remember correctly.
That swimsuit edition's one of the harder ones to get as well.
Yeah.
So, that's the one. That's the only issue from that. That cover's the only one I'm missing from. I think all of Moonstone as well.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah.
People not selling that copy.
No.
For those of you, Captain Action is I'm familiar with Captain Action as being a toy. Was he a toy before he was a comic, or was he a comic and then became the toy?
No, so he was a toy. So it's kind of like a G.I. Joe.
Yeah. He's got different costumes. You can pretend
maybe
to be different.
A G.I. Joe crossed with a Barbie, in the sense that he had lots of costumes.
Yeah, and about the same size. Yeah.
And I remember in the story that there's he disguises, well, one of them disguises as the other, or maybe they both disguise as each other in some. I can't quite remember, but I remember the disguise part comes into the story. Then there's Dynamite. Dynamite they've got a number of crossovers. There was the King Watch series, so you got King's Watch, King's Quest, and King's Cross, which are all built on the same universe, and they involve Flash Gordon. They involve what's his name, Mandrake, and Lothar. So we've got the band back together from Defenders of the Earth. However, the way the Phantom is done, if anything, he's not our Phantom compared to, well, that's our Flash Gordon, that's our Mandrake, and that's our Lothar. But who the hell's this Phantom? And as much potential as this story on this storyline had, I think it irked a lot of people, a lot of Phantom fans, the way that the Phantom character was in this story. Of course, there was other characters as well. Jungle Jim, he was a standout. I've never heard of Jungle Jim before, and he was brilliant in. Which one did he come in? King's Cross or King's Quest? He wasn't there at the start, but he was there by the end.
I think
Prince Valiant was also in there as well somewhere.
I think that was when they had their standalone 4 issues. Which is when they all kind of came back together. So originally it was just the Defenders of the Earth, and then the Imposter Phantom died. So then that's when Lothar stepped in, and then they had the 4 issues of the 6 characters, or the 4 or 5 characters, and then they came back together twice. I think it was, yeah. So just random. What like I personally didn't mind the initial imposter, but I thought the series, and then I was sitting on the fence with Lothar, but then I quickly jumped off the fence when Jen was the missing Phantom. So that was my personal opinion. I thought the King's Watch, brilliant, and then it slowly went downhill. What about you guys?
Yeah, that's pretty much my experience with it as well. I didn't mind Lothar as a Phantom, particularly like you've got to accept from the beginning that, okay, so we're dealing with a Phantom that is not Kit Walker and is not in that line. And that's okay. I didn't mind King's Watch, if you accept that. Lothar coming in, but same with you. It was when Jen came in that the series really went downhill. I think what would have saved it, the problem was they just kept pushing and they kept going further and further further and further away from the Phantom. And as we've know him, and as I think we've mentioned on a podcast recently, once you play too hard with the law, you lose who the Phantom really is. So if Lothar had found Heloise and handed it over to her, and it had been Heloise as we know and love her, I think that would have worked. But Jen was a weak character when we first met her. Yeah. I think if they'd found Heloise, it would have saved the series for me.
I've never thought about that. So yeah, that's a very good. Yeah, I have to give you kudos for thinking that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there, Dan. When Jen first came on the scene, I first thought of her as I don't know if you've ever read the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, yeah. The Dark Knight Returns, the comic, the famous comic. I've probably said it wrong. It's like whatever one the movie. What is the movie called? Dark Knight Rises.
Just Batman Dark Knight, isn't it? I don't know. I'm not much of a Batman fan.
Right, the Dark Knight Returns, I think it is. Frank Miller, and I just thought Jen just looked like Robin from that, and I thought she was just a bit of a knockoff. So I wasn't a fan of hers from the start. And yeah, then making her the Phantom, she seemed quite weak. But yeah, if it was made Heloise, like you just said, then Dan, that would have turned it around. Well, it had the potential to turn it around anyway. The writer's still got to write something good.
Yeah.
And Dynamite had another crossover series called Legendary. Now, this focused from memory on Red Sonja and on her adventures going across different landscapes, different characters. There was Zorro, there was Flash Gordon, and of course, it was the Phantom. And this was a fun crossover. Devil also makes an appearance in here, and Devil just steals the show. He steals every scene he's in. He's trying to get the Phantom. This one, which actually links closer to the law. The Phantom needs a wife or a partner in order to keep the line going, and Devil's trying to play matchmaker here, and so it actually has a little bit of fun with the story. So I like this crossover of Legendary, and also like it because it what got me on podcast in the first place. I was someone who enjoyed it and had read it all and got into it.
No, I remember when we first started recording it and reviewing on the podcast, I was like, I'm not really interested in this. But then I brought a trade paperback of the collection of it, and I read it cover to cover, and I think I now actually enjoy the series. Like, you're right, Devil was amazing. He was funny. He was, he's probably one of the best sidekicks you ever experience. And then I didn't mind the relationship between the Phantom and Red Sonja either. And then how it all went through. It was a fun issue. And even though there was a lot of Phantom elements that were kind of neglected, I guess, the ones that they did follow on with and they did keep, it worked. And for it to be kind of like a fun series, the Phantom shone, and I thought, as a Phantom fan, and maybe I'm not a traditionalist in the sense that I'm hard traditionalist and I can enjoy a little bit of fun. It ticked the boxes for me.
What about you, Dan? Did you read it?
I did. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed the devil character. It's not something I'm aching to go back and reread, but no, it was a bit of fun, lighthearted, and if you don't take it too seriously, just move on. Enjoy it, popcorn, move on. So no, it was good. So we talked at the start about licensed or authorized crossovers. This next one is one that was not licensed, but is probably the first. So it deserves a mention in terms of a comic crossover. It's the first time ever that the Phantom crossed into another character's universe. So we have to talk about it. It has been published in Frew issue 1763, I want to say.
So does that make it licensed now?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it absolutely was not licensed in 1941 or 39 or whatever it was when it was produced. And I am, of course, talking about Zigamar versus the Phantom, which is the Yugoslav of all places. Yugoslavia have a comic character, or did at least. I don't know about currently, but called Zigamar, who was quite a popular comic character in Yugoslavia at the time, and they wrote a crossover issue with the Phantom appearing, and the two came to blows a number of times. They were friends, they were not friends, etc. So it was an interesting one. The Phantom Wiki lists it as unknown when it was first published. So that didn't work. I thought, I'll sneaky go to Phantom Wiki, but it has let me down. But I was right in the sense that it was issue 1763 that it was published, but in Australia by Frew. That was their 8 Nations in 8 Decades issue with the embossed cover for those who want to go back and have a look at that one. It was an unlicensed story. It has since been published. So, yeah, what do you think? Is it? I think it's probably still unlicensed.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I want to actually go out on a bit of a limb and say that was the first non-newspaper created story as well.
It could easily be. Yeah.
So it deserves, and I think that's why we included it, because it deserves a very good mention in that. It was the first crossover. It was, probably the first non-newspaper created story. It was a bit of a drag, the story, just from a story perspective. But there was elements in there that it was enjoyable. I think we saw some old Phantom villains in there. It had all the Phantom kind of elements. I think it was Baron or from one of them. But look, for what it is and when it was created and all that, I enjoyed it, and I think it deserves a good mention.
Yeah. Do you remember reading it, Steve?
Yes, but it hasn't ingrained itself into my memory. It's just, okay, it was a story.
Yeah, fair enough.
From Yugoslavia. Great.
Fair enough.
Move on. Thanks.
Cool. Another, I guess, more obscure one that people may not have first thought of, and I'm actually when I saw you'd added it to the list, Jerm, I thought, wow, that's a good get. It's a story called Masks of the Phantom, which was published by Lightning Strikes in the last year or two, maybe 3. Probably it's clearly more obscure because it's published in Ireland and it hasn't had a huge, there wasn't, what's the nice way to say it? They struggled to get their product to market, fair to say. So maybe not lots of people have read this issue of Lightning Strikes, but it's a crossover story between the Phantom and a character called Varg Vem. And I've probably got the pronunciation wrong there because it's a character from Norway, quite famous in Norway and quite popular. He's been in 19 novels in the Varg Vem series. And sounds a bit like the character is a private detective who lives on the west coast of Norway. And so for the Phantom to cross over into that world and with that character is probably not something that is going to really resonate with a lot of Australian readers who may not have even, or worldwide readers, if didn't have access to the Irish comic with the Norwegian character appearing in it.
And let's face it, a Lightning Strikes comic is rarer than a Frew #1. So yeah, look, I actually enjoyed him as a character, and I guess with someone like him, compared to, say, some of the characters from the Legendary series, he's more likely to be able to coexist with a detective like Varg Vium than, Zorro or Red Sonja or, or something like that. Another one that I did forget would be Sherlock Holmes. Well, actually, no, not Sherlock Holmes. Moriarty in the Frew trade series, and also in the there was a story where Moriarty fell in love with Julie and then battled the 17th Phantom as well. So I can't remember what it was called, the Moriarty Experiment or something at the top of my head. But I remember that story now just purely because I read it recently while I was working on a secret project.
Very good. Well, and as you said right at the top of the show, we're not going to get everything, and I'm sure that there'll be people going, "Oh, but you didn't mention." Well, if that's you, if you're driving in the car on the way to work and you're saying, "Well, you forgot this comic or that story or whatever," as Jim said at the time, email us chroniclechamber@gmail.com and let us know.
Yes, definitely. So now we're going to have a bit of fun. There's with some parodies. Now, majority of these parodies are not licensed. But and again, there's a whole pile of them that we've included on our Phantom Preservation Project. Now, if you're wondering what the Phantom Preservation Project is, go to our website, go to our show notes. It will all be explained there. Now, my favourite out of these would be from the Mad Sunday parody of Phantom. That was just... It was stupid. It pointed really, it made the Phantom not look good or anything like that, but it was a bit of fun. A couple of others, there's been a Brazil Defenders of the Earth parody comic, which it's like a little digest size. It's, and then probably one that most fans would know of would be the Robot Chicken Defenders of the Earth. These are all seen that one?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. When the Defenders of the Earth become the neighborhood watch or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that was fun. It wasn't exactly what would you call it? It wasn't exactly probably kosher, but it was a bit of fun. There's a few from like the Mad series and stuff like that as well. So again, as we're discussing this, we'll show up screenshots and stuff like that. But the Mad Sunday ones, they were probably one of the first parody type of ones. You have anything to add about any of the parodies, or?
Well, the Robot Chicken is a personal favourite of mine as well, and it, as you say, it's irreverent and takes and absolutely pulls the Mickey out of the Defenders of the Earth. It's only a 2 or 3 minute clip. In terms of seeing Defenders of the Earth on as a kid, I didn't. I did see this live on Robot Chicken because I was actually a fan of the show and had pay TV at the time, and so it was on, and I was watching it, and then I was blown away, jumped out of my chair. I said, "What, the Phantom's on Robot Chicken?" It was just came out of absolutely nowhere, and I was so excited. So so I've got that fun memory as well.
From memory, it was, when did it come out? It came out like in the 2000s when there wasn't much Phantom out there.
Yeah.
So it probably stands out more for a lot of, say, our generation, in the sense that we were all fans, and there was Frew and Moonstone and then Phantom Man, and that was kind of like it. And then there was no products, there was no merchandise, or it was just a couple of comics, and then something came on mainstream media, and it was.
Yeah, it must have been about 2005, I reckon, because I can remember the lounge room I was in when I saw it. So when I lived in that house.
I think I've got it on DVD. That's when I first saw it. I thought, "Oh, this would be funny," and whacked on the DVD. Hey, there it goes. Look at that. But not only do they take the Mickey out of Transformers and DC and whatever, we even get the Defenders of the Earth, and I thought that was great. So good on you, Seth Green and your team.
Yeah.
So parodies, do you mind the Phantom being teased in a parody, or is it kind of like, and I suppose, Dan, you're the resident Fawkes, and we ham it up a little bit and have a bit of fun and stuff like that. But like from someone who's probably more, staunch and stuff like that, where's too much with the Phantom being taken the mickey out of in a parody?
I think it's too much is when it's disrespectful. And you can be tongue in cheek, you can tease, you can be irreverent, but when there is a line that you cross, and not too. I don't think there's any of those in the preservation project. I might not have let them stay in. If you see the Phantom being rude or over the top. There's one I can think of where he's using the skull thrown as the joke is that the skull thrown as the toilet and he flushes it. I'm like, well, that's not particularly funny. It just seems disrespectful to literally take a dump on the skull thrown. So that's probably too far. Don't dump on the skull thrown.
Well, Jason Paulos did that, didn't he? In his hairbutt.
Yeah, and I didn't enjoy that one. But as I've already said, the robot chicken is a real favourite, and I enjoy having fun with the Phantom. The mad ones were generally pretty good. Yeah.
So where would you go with, say, the Brazilian did the Playboy one?
Yeah.
And then there was the Tijana Bible as well. So as a parody, where they're not crossovers, so to speak, but like, is that too far, or is it in a sense of the Phantom in something is better than the Phantom not in something?
Well, they are certainly disrespectful in terms of this is not what the Phantom, this is not how anyone imaged the Phantom. But I think those things hold collector value. And I own the Playboy from Brazil. So I'm certainly not so anti it that it doesn't get into the collection. It's a point of interest. You wouldn't want there to be tons of that stuff around, though.
Stephen, anything to add, or should we move on?
I'm ready to move on.
All right.
Couldn't add anything more. I think Dan's has summed it up nicely.
All right, cool.
Okay. Don't take on the skull throne.
Yeah, exactly. You can have fun without being offensive. Well, there's a line, and
yeah. Cool. So then, obviously, there's lots of promotions and fan art, of the Phantom and crossovers. Like I remember Alex Suviak when he came to Australia, he did a Defenders of the Earth one. He did one with what was it? We did one with the Shadow as well. Just recently, we released an article where there was a chance of a crossover between the Phantom and Doc Shadow.
Doc Savage.
Doc Savage, that's it. So, there are some of those as well. But some promotion work, obviously, with King Features having a lot of characters, there's a lot of promotions with the Phantom in all of them. Some of the ones that kind of like stand out to, I guess, us, as we've discussed. One of my favourite ones is the football lineup one. Is there any others from you guys that you can remember that you want to talk about briefly?
Well, I was a little bit sad just recently. Being Halloween and what have you. I'm pretty sure there was a Blondie comic where was it Dagwood was going out to give out the chockies and whatever, and there was a whole bunch of different King Features characters lined up to get their chockies. No Phantom. I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, they used to be quite prominent, didn't they? I'm just showing a couple on screen for the YouTube watchers. This is a Christmas gathering of all of the King Features characters, and you've got your Popeyes and your Dagwoods and lots more that I don't even know anymore have passed beyond. And the Phantom's over there under the Christmas tree, as well as with the rest of the crew. And the football one that Jim mentioned is here as well with not just King Features characters. Superman's in this one as well. Has made the All Stars team. So I think this is a Dagwood Bumstead promotion, but where that's come from, I quite enjoy these old ones. because it does. Oh, where'd you go? I'm old and I don't know which button to do what. Yeah, so I quite enjoy seeing, and as a historian too, I enjoy seeing those older characters and the older way of presenting them. So
I like the King Comics one with the girl Phantom on the back. So that was when they did the King series. There was the Phantom, there was Flash, there was Mandrake, but there was also Dagwood, and I think there was Blondie, I think some others. They had their own comic title, and then on the back they had the girl Phantom reading comics along with all the other characters and stuff like that as well. And it's kind of cool. Like, it makes you wonder. Maybe, there it is. There, no, it's not. There it is. Yeah. If you're on YouTube, you'll see it there. It kind of like makes you wonder, could Frew do something like that on the back of their giant size of having, all the Frew characters and the Phantom reading comics or reading each other's comics and stuff like that. Like, it's, it's silly, but it's fun. It's, a bit exciting. It's something new and stuff like that as well. So, maybe there's a place of that on the back of a giant size comic. And then
I just remembered one that we didn't say.
What was that?
That was Mandrake in Kid Phantom.
Yes.
Young Mandrake in Kid Phantom.
Yes, of course. Did not mention that one either.
One other one, which isn't technically the Phantom, but was very definitely based on the Phantom. Animal Man was a villain in a DC comic. I want to say Batman, but I could be wrong. It could be a League of Superheroes or something like that, Super Friends. But I'm sure there was this a villain of the week, and it was Animal Man, and he kind of like the top half had the Phantom guys, and then he had his the trunks on, and his legs were bare, and it was just different enough not to be the Phantom, but very much based on the Phantom.
Interesting. I know while we're talking about, I guess, that there was a rumor of the Phantom and Batman appearing in a crossover in the 1990s. From memory, it got the go-ahead with DC, but then from memory, it was King Features that put the stop to it. And I think some of the people that were talking about, or that were involved with it, was Graham Nolan, and then Glenn Ford was involved with it as well. And I think Glenn Ford talks about it in his first ever podcast he did with us, which would have been a long time ago. And of course, there's that one there, which was done for a convention as well, I believe it was.
Yeah, so a lot of people will have seen this, because Graham Nolan was obviously the artist on both Phantom and Batman, either simultaneously or certainly he's done both characters in this commissioned piece, which a few people will have seen do the rounds on Facebook at different times, Phantom and Batman at each other's throats.
Yeah, so I guess, so guys, what, and as we've said, we'll after we finish this podcast, I can guarantee we'll be going, oh, what about this one? What about that one? We forgot to talk about this one. And
the Kid Phantom one was a good get. Well done, Steve, because, I really enjoyed Boy Drake when he came into the Kid Phantom universe. So, yeah, well done.
And so if there are other people out there that you were listening to it and you're yelling at us saying, what about this one? What about that one? Make sure, as we've already said a few times, make sure you mention it in the comments, or you can email us as well. So I guess
there's another one.
What's that?
Phantom Limb from, I think I want to say, the Venture Brothers.
Oh, yeah. The little doll kind of looks like the Phantom as well. There's, I know.
So not exactly the Phantom, but very much inspired by.
Yeah. And I guess you've got other ones like we've discussed, Matt Kimes, The Demon, Kieran Jack's, what's that series called? The Apparition?
Yeah. They're not really crossovers as such, but they're more parody-ish, certainly.
Yeah, just getting back in the parodies, I guess.
Yeah. In terms of appearances, the Comics Review covers, the Phantom often appears on those with other characters, and of course the giant size covers as well. If we're talking in that sense, there's regularly on both of those publications other characters with the Phantom in a scene and getting up to mischief or action or whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to list some of our favourite crossovers or appearances. And I guess we're just going to have a bit of fun talking about some of that. And we've already kind of probably touched upon some of our favourites as we go, but we're just going to focus on here. So, Dan, do you want to give us your, a handful of your favourites and why?
Yeah, look, I have a feeling that we might have a lot of crossover in this little chat. So, because to me, there's some ones that really stand out, and for me, those are Defenders of the Earth. Again, not so much because I enjoyed it, although I do, but more because of the impact that it had, because of the new fans it brought, and for it to have the impact on a generation of cartoon watchers like you, Steve. It would seem that Seth Green was one of those, and Robot Chicken's another one of my highlights. If I count that as a separate crossover, because while it was Defenders of the Earth inspired, so I guess that speaks to the impact that Defenders of the Earth had. It was the first time really there was any genuine attempt at a meaningful crossover, rather than just Mandrake coming to Phantom's wedding. And so for the impetus that they gave to other creators to say, well, here's a way of doing it. And I guess along the same lines, really, King's Watch and the series of comics that followed it up to a point, as we discussed when we talked about it.
Yeah, the King's Watch is a good one. Like, the first 5 story art was brilliant. And I remember actually being in a comic book shop, and I had it, and I was about to buy it, and then there was, DC, Marvel fans, and they were going, "Oh, look, it's the new Defenders of the Earth." I remember, and then for the next, I was there for the next half hour as they were telling me about, reading Defenders of the Earth and how they started reading Phantom comics because of Defenders of the Earth, and then they talked about, same as what Stephen did, about a coloring in book or a figurine, or then the comic book shop owner was talking about it as well, and so there was a 30-minute discussion, and then they started going, does the Phantom still produce comics? And then the comic book shop owner was going, yeah, they're over there. And so then they went over and started thumbing through them and all that. And that was purely because I had a King's Watch comic that I was going, I was getting paid for. So I think Defenders of the Earth for the 80s and probably even maybe the early 90s, and then the King's Watch had that potential to be able to do that. But in typical Dynamite fashion, they screwed the pooch.
It blew up in their faces.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a pity because, and I would love to get Jeff Parker on the podcast, who was the writer of the first arc, and find out and ask him where he wanted it to go, and whether what followed was where he wanted it to go or whether he had a different direction. So, Stephen, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to ask where Steve was at.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to change with you guys. Defenders of the Earth, absolutely, for its impact and its wide-ranging, international appeal to everyone. And that's the same deal with Robot Chicken. It's not just a small, well, I guess it is kind of small people who are watching that sort of TV, but it's an international audience.
Yeah.
More eyes on the product. So those two, just for the sheer ability to get more eyes on the product or more eyes on the character, and then the fantastic Shane Foley stories that have been coming out, through Giant Size and that Frew have been doing they'd be third on the list, mainly because it's mainly just Australian, but the quality has been so good.
Yeah, that's good. If I was to choose something that probably have we not already mentioned, and I think, we don't want to just say, oh yeah, maybe this as well. I enjoyed the promotional stuff from King Features of, which we showed some of the stuff, because purely, I guess, because it's from a collector's point of view, is that, I'm looking around in my room now and I can see a Moonstone cup that's got all of their characters on it. I can see a King Features pencil holder that's got all of their characters on it and stuff like that. And then I can see some stickers that have got King Features characters on it and stuff like that. And that crossover stuff for me, you know, is important because you go out and buy it. But so there's not only the Phantom fans that are going out to buy it, but there's the Flash Gordon fans that are buying it. There's Prince Valiant fans. There's all these other type of fans, which makes that item collectible because there's that crossover platform that could then, you know, and so like for instance, I've got comics, I've got items from other spheres or other characters purely because there's, you know, a little tiny little Phantom's head on it, which you know, like I'm looking at this pencil holder now. Hang on, give me 2 seconds and I'll grab it.
While Germ's getting that, it's interesting that like King Features could do that today. Comics Kingdom could produce a poster or a A4 size print or a sticker pack of exactly what you're talking about.
So this is it here. So that's the only Phantom that's on it, but this is a fairly collectible thing. It came out in the 58. And there's a lot of Phantom fans that have been trying to pick this up purely because of that little Phantom thing on there. And it's, you know, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, and it's embossed as well, which is pretty neat. But it just goes to show for me the importance of the Phantom being relatable or being able to be crossover with other characters. And so apart from the ones we've discussed, the Defenders of the Earth, Robot Chicken, the Frew stories, I like some of the promotion and the merchandise as well. Right. So we've talked a fair bit. We've talked about the past hour about crossovers and which ones we've been excited by and stuff like that. So Dan, tell us why crossovers are important to you.
Well, that's a loaded question because they're not really. To be blunt, crossover stories are not super important to me because I already like the Phantom and tolerate's the wrong word, but I tolerate crossover stories for want of a better word because they spread the audience, get more eyes on the character, and hopefully get them to, you know, fall in love with the Phantom and become Phantom fans as well. So they're not particularly important to me personally, but they're certainly important to the Phantom universe and the growth of the character.
So what about you, Stephen? First of all, are they important to you? And if yes or no, let us know.
Well, already being a fan, I'm already hooked. So say that I need a crossover to hook me in. No, then that wouldn't be important to me. However, I do enjoy a good crossover. I don't want a crossover just for the sake of it. I like the way that they can add another element to a story or to a storyline that might be getting stale, but I don't want a crossover for the sake of a crossover. It needs to be there. It needs to be relevant.
And
it needs to be enjoyable.
What about you, Jeff? They're important to you, obviously.
Oh, hang on. I just want to follow up with Stephen. So with that, do the Frew stories tick those boxes for you?
Yeah, well, for the most part, they do. But the other Frew agenda there is to see if they can build up their other characters, and you know, give their other characters, you know, flesh them out like I was saying before, fleshed out Raven and Sir Falcon and what have you. And could they produce? You know, they could be lead-in comics or pilot comics, if you like, so they could produce another publication. So, you know, a whole thing on the Shadow. You know, might do a mini series on the Shadow, and people, you know, it might be viable because people know that this character from reading it in Phantom. So I'm not saying like a whole, you know, every fortnight they're going to release a new Shadow for, you know, X amount. I'm saying like a 4-issue mini shot or something like that of the, you know, 4-part Shadow series or 4-part Raven series. Maybe that might have legs only because of the crossover. So that doesn't really benefit the Phantom, but it benefits these other characters.
So would you
make it important would be a way to benefit the character, to benefit the Phantom. And I don't see the Frew characters, the Frew crossovers, benefiting the Phantom in the same way as the Phantom's benefiting these other characters.
Yeah. So if it was, say, for instance, if licensing was an issue, so if the Phantom appeared in a Batman comic, which I'm assuming seeing Batman's bigger, it would then benefit the Phantom. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it should.
Yeah.
But it'd have to be handled really well.
Mm.
And you don't want the Phantom playing second fiddle and be poor man's Batman. As far as I'm concerned, Batman is poor man's Phantom. But we don't want that going the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, for me, crossovers are important from... Now,
I should say I do really enjoy a good Batman story. It's just that I much prefer the Phantom before the hate mail comes flying in.
Now, I understand what you're saying about that, but I think the Phantom crossover, whether he's the main influencer or whether he's the under influencer, I think it is important because it gives the potential for the universe to be expanded. And it gives the potential for more room and more, stories to be able to be created and stuff like that. Now, obviously, we need to make sure that the Phantom is the Phantom or close enough to the Phantom, i.e. in the first King's Watch and in Legacy, which was a little bit where there was a lot of license given, but he was still recognizable enough to be our Phantom. So for me, yeah, they are important. It will be nice to be able to see, and like I said, I don't think it's going to happen, but it would have been nice to see the Phantom crossover with Batman, whether Batman chased a hero from Gotham and ended up in Bengala, or I think like the Phantom needs something, so it rings up Bruce Wayne for a bit of tech or something like that. So I think
like your first issue. I like your first. The Phantom doesn't need tech.
Yeah, well, I'm just spitballing here, but so I think there is potential. I think there is importance. I think crossovers are a lot more acceptable and a lot more mainstream now with all the TV shows, the movies, and stuff like that than probably ever before. I do like the crossovers with the newspaper stories. Like this tends to be like, Mary Worth was in there. Like for instance, if Judge Parker, if the Phantom appeared in Judge Parker, we would probably all at least read that little sequence and and stuff like that. So I think there's also the potential if King Features want to improve their character reach and improve other people to read it and stuff like that, I think there's room for crossovers as well. So
it'd get more clicks on Comics Kingdom, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If all of a sudden the word got out that the Phantom's appearing in Judge Park, or the Phantom's appearing in another one of the stories, for a week or two, well then we'll all be clicking on that as well as checking out our daily strip.
Yeah, and it's just because we're all suckers for more Phantom.
Yeah. Get that purple crack in your veins.
Now, there was, after the Raven stories, which is what I'm holding up now, which was issue 1880 and 881, there was a cryptic message from Dudley. Now, it's not actually in the message from the publisher because I just checked and I couldn't actually find it because I was trying to give it to you in a quote, but I think it was in a letter, like a letter in the forum section.
I think it was. I thought he'd said something in the message to the publisher, but maybe in an issue after the Raven.
Yeah, so basically it was saying that the chances are the Raven will be the last crossover for a while. Now, I remember we discussed this on a podcast, and I remember it's kind of been something we've discussed continuously ever since. And when was this comic published? This comic was published, when was it? A year or two ago?
A year or two ago, yeah.
2020. So a year ago. So just over a year ago. Now, in playing detective and trying to join dots, which, We may or may not be joining the right dots. It seems like that Frew have been instructed to stop doing crossovers with the Frew created characters. Now, if that is true, do you think that's a good decision from King Features, or do you think King Features need to let the reins loose a little bit and let them play in the Frew sandbox a little bit more?
I don't think it weakens the character. I think it's all right. It's just like having any other author or creator just creating characters for their stories. These just happen to be Frew created stories, and they've got these. They just happen to have these characters that they can use already ready to go.
It's an interesting one because what you said before, Steve, is exactly right. The Phantom doesn't need these other characters to extend his reach in Australia. So it is really to the benefit of those other characters. So to that end, from a business point of view, it is absolute no skin off KFS's nose. They don't care one way or the other. It sucks for Frew because that's something that they have been doing and we've been seeing more of. You mentioned, all of the crossovers that have appeared in the last 10 years, German. These certainly are a big part of that since Glenn and Renee and Dudley have been the powers that be at Frew, that these things have come across. So yeah, it's probably another example of King Features just, as you say, having the reins really super tight with uber control over the character. And could they let the reins looser? Yes, absolutely they could. Should they? I don't know, because for them, they shouldn't. Why would you bother? Why would you risk it for this when there's no benefit to their character? If it was to go the other way to a Batman, because you're right, that would be very much for the Phantom, not for Batman. Yeah, maybe they should from a business perspective. So.
Now, I reckon they're important, and not purely from that, because, and I understand where you're coming from in the sense that it doesn't affect the Phantom, so to speak, but the Phantom for a long period of time, and this isn't a King Features problem, this is probably a Frew problem, a Frew created problem. The Frew comic in the 90s and probably in the 2000s, and only just recently it stopped, has almost been like an exclusive type of comic and not really part of the Australian created comic scene. And it's only probably since like Jason Paulos, Glenn Ford, Glenn Lumsden, Gary Challenor, Paul Mason, Gary Challenor, who's created covers and bits and pieces, and then you've got the younger guys in with like I dare to mention Andrew Constant as one of the younger writers, but like him, Paul Mason, Daniel Picciardi.
Andrew Constant wrote The Raven, didn't he?
Yeah. So, but you've got these Australian created people writing these crossover stories. It's kind of made the Phantom in that little niche market more relevant again, and then it's also, they've also gone, oh yeah, those old 50s and 60s comics, and I've read stories where people are only buying the giant size issues. They're not buying the regular series, but they're solely buying the giant size issues. And then if you're having, and it wouldn't be a huge numbers, it may be 50 people, so to speak, but but then buying more comics from the Frew wheelhouse is a good thing. And so, yeah, it doesn't affect the Phantom, and it doesn't probably affect King Features, but more Phantom out there, I think, is a good thing. And so I think it is important that we see, that we continue to see the crossovers, because the Shadow, when people think of the Shadow, they're not going to be thinking of the Frew Shadow. They're going to be thinking of the American pulp fiction Shadow from Alec Baldwin, of the one that he starred in and stuff like that. But for Australia, we don't, for some people in Australia, they don't care about the US comics. They're all about Australian comics. And so it's reaching that target audience for Australian readers. And so I think to get, and it's a multi-prong. So not only is it important doing those crossover stories, but getting newer Australian creators creating these stories and doing covers and all that. It's it's making the Frew comic in Australia more relevant than what it was 20 years ago.
That's a really good point, and more relevant to the Australian comic book scene, because lots of those guys have now got a seat at the table at the Phantom, and the Phantom is now getting a seat at the table in the Australian comic scene. So that's actually a really good point. Getting those guys invested in the character, and you're more likely to spruik it at conventions because, hey, I also did the Phantom, blah 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 blah. So yeah, you're absolutely right in that sense.
So there was a couple of other points. Did any of you have some other questions that you just wanted to ask?
Yeah, well, I think we can. What we've been leading to is that the Frew crossovers are very different to the King Features crossovers. So King Features want to cross over with characters inside their folder, which is fair enough, and that's where Defenders of the Earth have come from. Now, they've done nothing much else with it in terms of a genuine crossover, and even King's Watch and all that, so we keep coming back to, it's Defenders of the Earth, it's Mandrake, Flash Gordon, and Lothar. So they stay in their little realm there, and they do, by virtue of the fact that Mandrake is a magician and that Flash Gordon is an astronaut and a space explorer. They're far more fantastical, fantasy type stories, whereas the Frew created crossovers are more realistic in terms of could actually exist in the world today. They're a real type story, and they're real characters. They're, for all of their differences, they're, at the end of the day, they're just a real person who's doing an extraordinary thing rather than an extraordinary being like I guess Flash Gordon is like that. Those guys are like that as well, but they're into outer space and that sort of stuff is my point. So it's just two different takes on the crossovers.
I think, and I've said it before, but I think King Features are missing a real trick that there should be more crossovers with their characters.
Yeah. Well, they've got so much capacity.
Well, yeah, there is. And I know some of them, like, for instance, there's not as many adventure strips. Like, I don't think Flash are doing new stories anymore. Mandrake's not doing new stories. But it's very easy for Merryworth or Judge Parker or, someone like that to be a part of the Phantom world, even though they're a drama series in a sense. Like Judge Parker could be friends with Uncle Dave, or they could be fishing buddies because they worked on a case together or something like that. Or, so like, for instance, there could, like Judge Parker, there could just be, and I'm spitballing here, you could be talking, there could be a news show, and there's a bad guy for Skullmark, and he goes, "Oh, that reminds me of a story that I told when I went fishing with Uncle Dave, and he told me about, Dave Palmer, and so there's those type of crossovers. I liked when Heloise and Merryworth shared a cab together, so it's not an adventure, so it doesn't have to just fit in the. Yeah, it doesn't just have to fit in the adventure strip. It can quite easily fit in the drama series. Now, could the Phantom fit in a world of, say, Popeye or Crazy Cat or something like that? Maybe not, but could Heloise be reading a Crazy Cat comic, or while they're in the plane, or or something like that? Could that happen? Yes, it could, and I think that would create more interest. It would also give King Features stuff to promote on their Facebook, on their blog posts, and stuff like that. You might get a Crazy Cat reader go, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I'm going to get that Phantom comic because Crazy Cat is in there," or there is that potential, and it doesn't create much more energy to be able to do that. Like just recently on social media, we talked about there was a slogan, "End World Hunger," where there was about 3 or 4 artists or creators contacted 176 other creators and said, "Hey, we want to promote the End World Hunger program that was in the 80s or something like that. And we're talking about the 80s. There was no internet then. Everything was mail or landline telephone. How much easier is it to be able to say, hey, look, we're going to do something like that, whether it's, end cancer or whatever, or as simple as what we talked about is, hey, can you, Terry, when you're doing a Judge Parker, can we have maybe just just one Sunday of talking about the Phantom or talking about Mary Worth, or there's potential there. Communication's a lot easier now. I think they are missing a lot, not having a bit of foresight and not being able to suggest some of that type of stuff.
I think you're also missing, like, you got the action strips and you got the drama strips. If you're getting the comedy strips, I reckon there's a quite potential there for Hagar the Horrible origin story about why he got such a big bushy beard. It's because he's been skull marked so many times. He needs to cover his face. There's so much potential there. Don't just stick with adventure and drama. Comedy can work with the fan. But in all seriousness, you mentioned something about Flash Gordon and Mandrake. They may not be being produced at the moment. I think Flash Gordon is still getting at least a Sunday. But I could be wrong. They could just be repeating stories. But they still have name value. People still know who Mandrake the Magician are, who Flash Gordon is. I should have said is rather than are. And that really boils down to, well, one, the Flash Gordon movie, and two, Defenders of the Earth. But you cannot rank Defenders of the Earth too highly. Like, it is, people know it. And like you said, when they had King's Watch, new Defenders of the Earth. People know what Defenders of the Earth is. And if KFS want to do a crossover, that's where it is, and that's where it started with King's Watch, and it started off well, and then it went down. But they brought in the new characters like Prince Valiant and Jungle Jim and the rest of them, and so it had so much potential because of that name that Defenders of the Earth had. So there's so much rich potential there with a crossover with KFS characters, with adventure strips. Excuse me. Thanks to the work that Defenders of the Earth did back in the 80s.
Yeah. So, random question: with the Dynamite crossover, the King's Watch. So there was the King series where they had the 4 or 5 separate titles, and there was 4 issues in each. Did you buy all of those, or did you just buy the Phantom? So you brought them all. I brought them all as well. And I think
just got the Phantom one. Did the Phantom appear much in the other ones?
No.
Not much, but there was kind of like a panel there was a couple of panels in one of the Mandrakes and stuff like that. But I guess the point is out of the 3 of us, and this is not a scientific poll by any means, but out of the 3 of us, 2 brought extra comics that we wouldn't normally buy because it was part of the larger arc. It was the possibility of the Phantom crossing over. And I remember, and I know of other people that brought either all of them or brought only the issues where the Phantom appeared in or on the cover and stuff like that as well. But you're looking at least, I would say, a third or a quarter of Phantom fans who were buying that series brought extra comics because of that crossover potential.
Now, is this something that's like straight out of like the Marvel or DC playbook where they have like the whatever story, the big overarching storyline, but it appears in your Spider-Man and your Wolverine and your Iron Man, and then of course there's the Avengers, so that's going on in there. So it links all these different storylines in through that comic. Or that one that the DC one, that End State or whatever it was. Like, I picked up a couple of these Nightwing issues. Mainly because it was Andrew Constant and what's her name?
Nicholas Scott.
Nicholas Scott. Thank you. And but I'm sure there were people who were more focused on the actual overarching story and would have picked up Nightwing. Would have picked up the couple of Batman ones that were going on. So is this something that King Features should look into and and had this wide-ranging thing and bring these characters back. I think that's what they were trying to do with King's Watch, like I said before, but then it went downhill.
Well,
Look, I think
even with the new Mandrake series, that is it 5-finity or something like it. It was full series, and this, I'll be honest, the series kind of sucked.
Yeah.
The artwork was pretty average. The storytelling was kind of clunky and pretty average as well. But there was the potential. Like you had Mandy, who was the new Mandrake. You had LJ, who was, kind of like the new Lothar. There was real potential for him to be able, at the end of it, to be able to have a Kit Walker being the new kid at class or something in the last panel of the last issue or something like that. And then, so they could have been, we've got a couple of new kids. There's Kit Walker and Flash. Or you can have a real name like a Richard Gordon, and he just calls himself Flash, or so there was that potential in that little thing, that this adventure from Mandy could have been the a way So there was that potential there as well, and we even talked about it in a podcast. Is this going to be a way for King Features to have a Defenders of the Earth ongoing series and stuff like that?
No, I'm sure we've also discussed it, and it would be years ago now, I think, the potential for a movie series, if we want to get really excited about it, a Phantom movie, a Flash movie, a Mandrake movie that ends in a Defenders of the Earth coming together. Obviously we'd really love to see something like that. And if they did that, crossovers would suddenly become very important to me.
Yeah, and you say that, but
the reason why that would be good was because of the work back in the 80s. Defenders of the Earth.
Yes, of course.
Where you got to hang your hat and put the movie, if you want to do the big adventure style or Justice League style crossover, it's Defenders of the Earth.
Yeah.
Tim Boyle did talk. Tim Boyle did talk about that in his podcast with us as well. We had the Legacy, which was going to be part 1, part 2, and then this was before Marvel, and they actually did say to him, "Oh no, that's not going to work. You're not going to be able to have a." I think he wanted a 5-part series. So Flash was owned by someone else, but he wanted to be in talks with them. So you're going to have the Phantom. Then I think it was going to be Mandrake, because Lothar was introduced in the Legacy movie because he was fighting as a freedom fighter, and then you had Mandrake, and then you had Flash, and then you had the big crossover as well. So you're right, Dan. There was talks about that, and we could have got it. We could have even got it before Marvel, all those years ago. And
yeah. If only.
If only. Now, guys, is there any other questions or things you want to kind of dream about or talk about or anything else like that before we sign off?
I just like to think that hopefully King Features has got something big planned. They've put this ban on crossovers so that they've got something brewing. Yeah, and I'm just being very optimistic and hoping that they've got something big happening. They don't want any perceived weakening of character through other people doing their own little crossovers. They want to have control of it, but it's going to be big and it's going to be great. So I'm hoping.
Well, for me, the obvious question we haven't asked you, if we talk about dreaming, big dreams, and you could do anything you wanted, which character would you love to see the Phantom in a crossover story with? A genuine one where, as we've talked about, no one's the title character. They're on equal footing. They're both they meet in the world. They have to solve a situation. Who would you pick as the ideal, the dream crossover? Or maybe that's overselling it. Who would you like to see?
Okay, so for me, it has to be realistic. So someone like Superman, probably not.
Yeah.
Batman, yes, but I worry about Batman overshadowing and the Phantom being perceived as a poor man's Batman.
Yeah.
For me, I would like to see something like maybe Black Panther, where, they team up to, I don't know, throw out a dictator, or, he asked the Bandit to come to help him you know, in Wakanda or something like that. In the olden days, someone like Sherlock Holmes, I think, will work good because they're both, you know, detectives. They've, you know, we've seen a lot of Phantom by Gaslight, which Sherlock works well with. But yeah, so for me, it has to be something realistic, not like X-Men or Superman or Captain Marvel, where it's just totally unrealistic, and the Phantom doesn't really fit so well. But in saying that, Black Panther's a bit unrealistic as well. But that, you know, that kind of does fit, I guess, because they're both African superheroes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd go. I think there's potential with a Batman, and it could be a two-parter or multi-parter, where the part that's in the city, you know, maybe the Batman takes the lead, but the part that comes in the jungle, where you see the Phantom really come to his own as well there. So I think there could be potential there, but yeah, even if it's not two-parter, if it's set in the jungle, well, that's a Phantom lead story.
Yeah, like that is the obvious one, I reckon. Probably the Phantom and Batman. You know, well, let's face it, they're very similar.
They're very similar.
You know, except one's in a concrete jungle, one's in a jungle.
Yeah.
You know, they both live in a cave. They both got lots of money. You know, so yeah, you're right. The Phantom's got Devil. Batman's got Robin. So yeah, you know, that would be Alfred Garand, the Batmobile hero.
I think it's one you could have a lot of fun with, and it would be one that I would nominate. Would be Batman. Black Panther was the other one I was thinking of, but it'd need to be really well written so that you didn't have that case of Batman overshadowing the Phantom. And I think a lot of the ways that because Batman is a character who's been written in so many different ways, and I think it might be the Dark Knight series, the one with Heath Ledger as Joker. Like that took the Phantom, took Batman in a bit of a different direction. You wouldn't go as campy as Adam West, but you want a Batman who's never been in the Justice League. You want a Batman who has only ever, you know, there's no Spider-Man, there's no, well, he's Marvel obviously, but you know, you want a Batman that hasn't met any of the other DC characters and is meeting the Phantom as two men who live by their wits in the jungle of their birth, if you like. Batman's got a few more toys. Maybe Phantom respects that, but then Batman respects the way that the Phantom goes about it as well. They both scare their opponents. I think there's a really good story in there, but it'd have to be written by a Phantom fan, not a Batman fan, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Maybe in the end, the Phantom gets the Batman to smile.
Maybe.
Well, let's sit around with a glass of milk. Yeah, no, that was fun. Anything else you just want to make mention? No worries, fans. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you had fun dreaming, thinking about it, remembering other crossovers and appearances that we haven't mentioned and stuff like that. Please give us some feedback of what you think. If you would like to see the Phantom doing crossovers, let us know. You can contact us via our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You know, we're on our website, which is chroniclechamber.com, which is where you can find us, see all our latest news. Our email address is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. And of course, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, all the various apps like Podbean, Player FM, Castbox, etc., etc. And of course, you can see us on YouTube. If you do, just a quick note about YouTube, we do put up little images and stuff as we talk, so it makes the viewing a little bit more interesting, so you're not just looking at our ugly mugs the whole time as well. So from myself, thank you listeners, thank you Dan, thank you Stephen, and to everyone, happy Phantoming, and have a good one.
Happy Phantoming, everybody.
Happy Phantoming.
Awesome.
It occurred to me halfway through, and I did a quick Google search. Maybe we should have done a crossover podcast with the Dagwood Bumstead Appreciation podcast, but it doesn't exist. So I couldn't actually find any other King Features characters that had podcast that's devoted to them.
Washed ashore, the sole survivor of a shipwreck, and upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom! The ghost who walks. The Phantom! Enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't mind the Phantom. He fights